Let's get straight into it. Survival horror. This is the one that defined the genre. Survival horror is built around resource scarcity. You have limited ammo, limited healing items, and enemies that are genuinely dangerous. Running is often smarter than fighting. The environment is usually a maze-like structure. A mansion, a police station, a spaceship, filled with puzzles that force you to backtrack through areas you thought were safe. The classic Resident Evil games are the blueprint. The original 1996 game dropped you into a mansion full of zombies with barely enough bullets to survive. Resident Evil 2 perfected the formula. Silent Hill 2 pushed it into psychological territory while keeping the resource management intact. Modern entries like Resident Evil 7 and the Dead Space remake prove the formula still works beautifully. The tension doesn't come from one big scare. It comes from knowing you have 3 bullets left and you just heard something breathing in the next room. Psychological horror. This subgenre messes with your head instead of your health bar. Combat is usually minimal or absent. The horror comes from confusion, unreliable narrators, shifting environments, and themes like guilt, trauma, and paranoia. The game questions your perception of reality and makes you doubt your own decisions. Silent Hill 2 is the masterpiece here. Every monster represents something buried in the protagonist's psyche. The town itself is a manifestation of guilt. Layers of Fear takes you through a constantly shifting Victorian mansion, where paintings change when you look away. Soma asks terrifying questions about consciousness and identity while you explore an underwater facility. Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice, though not purely horror, uses audio hallucinations to put you inside a mind breaking apart. Psychological horror sticks with you long after the credits because it doesn't just scare you, it unsettles something deeper. Action horror. Action horror gives you bigger weapons and faster combat, but keeps the horror atmosphere and enemy design. You're not helpless anymore, but the things you're fighting are still grotesque and the tension is still there. It trades slow burn dread for adrenaline-pumping panic. Resident Evil 4 is the landmark title. Leon Kennedy has way more firepower than any previous protagonist, but the Ganados are relentless and the set pieces are intense. The opening village sequence is one of the most famous encounters in gaming history. Dead Space 2 cranked the action up from the first game while keeping the body horror and dread intact. The Evil Within blends action with surreal nightmare logic. Doom 3, despite being an FPS, is absolutely a horror game with its dark corridors and demonic ambushes. Action horror proves that having a shotgun doesn't make you safe. It just means you can fight back while you're terrified. Stealth horror. Stealth horror strips away your weapons completely. You cannot fight. You can only run, hide, and pray. The entire game becomes about avoiding detection. You spend your time crouching in lockers, hiding under beds, holding your breath while something horrible searches the room. The powerlessness is the point. Amnesia. The Dark Descent basically created this subgenre. You have no combat abilities whatsoever. Your only tool is running and hiding in the dark, which drains your sanity. Outlast put you in a psychiatric hospital with nothing but a camcorder and the desperate hope that the thing chasing you didn't see where you went. Alien Isolation perfected the formula with a xenomorph that learns from your behavior. If you hide in lockers too often, it starts checking them. These games are pure stress, and they're brilliant for it. Walking simulator horror. This is a close cousin to psychological horror, but distinct enough to deserve its own category. Walking simulator horror games have minimal gameplay mechanics. You walk, you examine objects, you experience a story. The horror comes entirely from atmosphere, narrative, and environmental storytelling. PT, the playable teaser for the cancelled Silent Hills, is the most famous example. It's just a looping hallway, but it terrified millions. Layers of Fear fits here too, though it has more interaction than a pure walking sim. What Remains of Edith Finch has deeply unsettling moments despite not being a horror game outright. The Gone Home model of exploration horror proves you don't need combat or even enemies to create dread. It's remarkable how much fear can come from simply walking through a space that feels deeply wrong. Mascot Horror. Mascot horror emerged in the 2000s and exploded into a cultural phenomenon. These games feature seemingly friendly, child-friendly characters twisted into something monstrous. The contrast between cute and horrifying is the hook. They often take place in family entertainment venues gone wrong. Pizzerias, toy factories, theme parks. Five Nights at Freddy's is the poster child. Animatronic animals that entertain during the day try to kill you at night. Poppy Playtime takes you into an abandoned toy factory with a blue creature called Huggy Wuggy, who is anything but huggable. Bendy and the Ink Machine traps you in a twisted cartoon world. Garten of Banbon pushes the formula to absurd extremes. The mascot horror genre proved that bright colors and sing-song voices can be far more disturbing than traditional gore. Retro horror. Retro horror deliberately uses the visual and audio limitations of older hardware to create fear. Low poly models, pixelated textures, fixed camera angles, and compressed audio aren't weaknesses here. They're tools. The limitations force your brain to fill in the gaps. What you can't quite see is scarier than what's fully rendered. Puppet Combo builds entire games in a PlayStation 1 aesthetic, complete with grainy filters and tank controls. Faith, the unholy trinity, uses Atari-era pixel art and rotoscoped cutscenes to tell a deeply disturbing story about demonic possession. The PS1 style horror resurgence in indie games shows that nostalgia and terror are a potent combination. These games prove that photorealism was never the secret to good horror. Body horror. Body horror focuses on the violation and transformation of the human body. Limbs twist where they shouldn't. Flesh melts and reforms. Things burst out of other things. The disgust is visceral and immediate. It's not about what's hiding in the dark. It's about what's happening to the body in the light. Dead Space is the undisputed champion here. The necromorphs are former humans twisted into screaming, blade-limbed abominations by an alien signal. The Thing game adaptation captures the paranoia of not knowing who's still human. Resident Evil has always had strong body horror elements, from the Tyrant to the Regenerators. Scorn takes you through a nightmare world made entirely of flesh and bone. Body horror makes your skin crawl in a way that ghosts and jump scares never can. Reverse horror. In reverse horror, you are the monster. You're not running from the nightmare. You are the nightmare. This subgenre flips the power dynamic completely and lets you experience horror from the other side. Carrion is the perfect example. You play as an amorphous flesh monster escaping from a research facility, slaughtering scientists as you grow and evolve. Maneater puts you in control of a shark terrorizing a coastline. Lucius has you playing as a demonic child, eliminating the residents of a mansion one by one. Dead by Daylight is built around the killer versus survivor dynamic, giving players equal time as the monster. Reverse horror is cathartic in a weird way. It explores the dark curiosity of what it would feel like to be the thing that goes bump in the night. Multiplayer horror. Horror is often considered a solo experience, but multiplayer horror proves that adding other people doesn't dilute the fear. Sometimes it amplifies it. Proximity chat means you can hear your friend scream and then go silent. Cooperation is fragile and panic is contagious. Phasmophobia has you and your friends investigating haunted locations with basic equipment, and the ghost can hear you talking. Dead by Daylight, as mentioned, is asymmetrical horror where one killer hunts 4 survivors. The Outlast Trials takes the Outlast formula and makes it cooperative, throwing you and friends into Cold War experiments. Lethal Company turns scavenging runs into comedy horror chaos. Multiplayer horror proves that being scared together is a completely different experience from being scared alone. Found footage horror. Found footage horror mimics the aesthetic of recovered video recordings. The camera is diegetic. It exists within the world. Visuals are often degraded with static, tracking lines, and lens distortion. The perspective is claustrophobic and personal. Outlast popularized this style with its camcorder night vision mechanic. The entire game is seen through a handheld camera. Blair Witch brings the iconic film franchise into games with similar found footage mechanics. The first-person VHS filter applied across many indie horror games creates the sense that you're watching something you weren't meant to see. Found footage makes everything feel more immediate and less safe. Short-form horror. Short-form horror delivers concentrated terror in a small package. These games are often free, experimental, and designed to be finished in a single sitting. They strip horror down to its essential elements and execute one terrifying idea perfectly. PT is the most famous example, even though it was only a teaser. The demo was so effective that its cancellation spawned a dozen imitators. Iron Lung traps you in a tiny submarine navigating an ocean of blood with nothing but a crude map and proximity sensors. It's barely an hour long and deeply terrifying. The closing shift and other Chilla's art games package short, unsettling experiences around mundane jobs. Short-form horror is where some of the most creative work in the genre happens right now. So those are the major types of horror games: survival horror, psychological horror, action horror, stealth horror, walking simulators, mascot horror, retro horror, body horror, reverse horror, multiplayer horror, found footage, and short-form experiments. The genre is massive and constantly mutating. Which type is your favorite? And which one have you never tried because you're honestly too scared? Let me know in the comments. If this breakdown helped you find your next nightmare, subscribe for more deep dives into gaming's darkest corners. Thanks for watching. Now go play something terrifying.